the flag bridge of the USS Enterprise. June 4th, 1942, 6 o'clock in the morning. The carrier is steaming at 25 knots through a calm Pacific dawn, 300 miles northeast of a tiny coral atoll called Midway. The sky is clear. The sea is flat. There is no land in any direction. A 55-year-old rear admiral is standing on the flag bridge with a cup of coffee. He is of medium height. He has a calm, almost expressionless face. He walks 10 miles a day on the deck of his flagship to stay fit. He does not drink. He does not smoke. He almost never raises his voice. His name is Raymond Ames Spruance. Until 8 days ago, he was a cruiser commander. He had never commanded an aircraft carrier in his life. He had never directed an air battle. He did not know how to read the technical details of carrier flight operations the way a naval aviator would. 8 days ago, the man who was supposed to command this fleet, Vice Admiral William Halsey, was admitted to the hospital at Pearl Harbor with a skin condition so severe he could not sleep. Halsey had recommended Spruance, his cruiser commander, to take his place. Admiral Nimitz had agreed. So Spruance is here. He is commanding Task Force 16, 2 aircraft carriers, the Enterprise and the Hornet, 6 cruisers, 9 destroyers. He has the most valuable warships the United States possesses in the Pacific Ocean. A few hundred miles to the west, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers are about to launch an attack on Midway. They are the same 4 carriers that struck Pearl Harbor 6 months ago. They are commanded by the most experienced carrier admiral in the world. They do not know the American carriers are here. In the next 4 hours, Raymond Spruance is going to make a decision that almost no one expected him to get right. He is going to launch every aircraft he has at the extreme edge of their range at a target he cannot see at exactly the right moment. How does a man who has never commanded a carrier win the most important carrier battle in history, 3 days after being handed the job? That answer begins with a friendship between 2 completely opposite men. Raymond Spruance and William Halsey were the 2 most unlikely friends in the United States Navy. Halsey was loud, profane, aggressive, and beloved by his men. He was a natural showman. He flew his own aircraft. He made headlines. He was the most famous fighting admiral in the Pacific. Spruance was quiet, precise, analytical, and almost invisible to the public. He did not seek attention. He thought before he spoke. He was the kind of officer who solved problems on paper before they happened. The Navy called him, behind his back, the man with the electric brain. The 2 men had served together for years. Spruance commanded the cruiser screen for Halsey's carrier task force. When Halsey raided the Marshall and Gilbert Islands in early 1942, Spruance's cruisers protected his carriers. When Halsey launched the Doolittle raid in April 1942, Spruance was part of the escort. Halsey trusted Spruance completely. He trusted him the way a man trusts someone whose judgment he has watched under pressure for years. In May 1942, the strategic situation in the Pacific reached its most dangerous point. American codebreakers at Pearl Harbor had determined that the Japanese were about to launch a massive operation against Midway Atoll. The Japanese intended to capture the atoll and to draw out the surviving American carriers to destroy them. Admiral Nimitz decided to ambush the ambush. He would position his carriers northeast of Midway, where the Japanese did not expect them, and strike the Japanese carriers while they were preoccupied with attacking the atoll. Nimitz had 3 carriers available: the Yorktown, just back from the Coral Sea and badly damaged, the Enterprise, and the Hornet, under Halsey. On May 26, 1942, Halsey's task force returned to Pearl Harbor. Halsey came ashore. He had been suffering for weeks from a severe case of dermatitis, a skin condition that some sources have described as related to shingles, brought on by stress and exhaustion. His skin was raw. He had lost 20 pounds. He could not sleep. The Navy doctors took one look at him and put him in the hospital. Halsey lay in his hospital bed and realized that he was going to miss the most important battle of the war. He could not command from a hospital. He had to recommend a replacement. Nimitz came to see him. He asked Halsey who should take task. Force 16. Halsey did not name a carrier admiral. He named his cruiser commander. He said, "Spruance, give it to Spruance. He is the best I have." Raymond Spruance took command of Task Force 16 on May 26, 1942. He had 3 days to prepare. The fleet sailed on May 28th. He had never commanded a carrier task force in his life. He had spent his career on battleships and cruisers, mastering the science of surface gunnery and ship handling. He understood the mathematics of naval warfare better than almost any officer in the Navy. He did not understand the practical art of launching, recovering, and directing carrier aircraft. He solved this problem the way he solved every problem. He delegated the part he did not know to the people who did. Halsey's carrier staff stayed with the task force. The most important of them was Captain Miles Browning, Halsey's chief of staff, an experienced and aggressive carrier aviator with a difficult personality. Spruance kept Browning and the entire air staff in place. He told them he would make the strategic decisions and that they would handle the technical execution of carrier operations. This was a remarkable act of self-knowledge. A lesser man, suddenly given command of a fleet, would have tried to prove that he knew everything. Spruance did the opposite. He admitted what he did not know and surrounded himself with people who did. The task force reached its assigned position, a point northeast of Midway that the Americans called Point Luck, on June 2nd. The Yorktown, under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, joined them there. Fletcher was the senior officer and held overall tactical command, but the two carrier groups would operate semi-independently. They waited. On the morning of June 4th at 5:34, a PBY Catalina patrol plane spotted the Japanese carriers. The report came in at 5:52. 4 Japanese carriers, 220 miles to the southwest of the American position, launching aircraft against Midway. Fletcher ordered Spruance to take Task Force 16 and attack the Japanese carriers. Fletcher would follow with the Yorktown once his own scout planes had returned. Spruance now had to make the most important decision of the battle: when to launch his strike. The textbook answer was to wait. The Japanese carriers were at the extreme edge of the range of Spruance's aircraft. If he launched now, his planes would have barely enough fuel to reach the target and return. If he waited an hour or two, he could close the distance and give his pilots a comfortable fuel margin. But Captain Browning, the air staff chief, argued for launching immediately. He had calculated that the Japanese carriers would be at their most vulnerable at a specific moment, while they were recovering and rearming the aircraft that had just attacked Midway. If the American strike arrived at that moment, it would catch the Japanese with fuel and bombs scattered across their flight decks. Browning came to Spruance on the flag bridge. He laid out the timing. He said, "Admiral, if we launch at 0700, our planes will arrive over the Japanese carriers at approximately 0900. That is when they will be recovering their Midway strike. Their decks will be full. They will be refueling and rearming. They will be at their most vulnerable." Spruance looked at the chart. He understood the risk. Launching at extreme range meant some of his planes would not have the fuel to get home. Some pilots would have to ditch in the ocean. He would lose aircraft and possibly aircrew to fuel exhaustion regardless of how the battle went. He also understood the opportunity. The chance to catch 4 enemy carriers with their decks full of fueled and armed aircraft was the kind of chance that came once in a war. Spruance thought for a moment. The men on the bridge watched him. He was famous for his deliberation. He weighed the cost of launching early against the cost of waiting. Then he made the decision that won the battle. He said, "Launch everything." Browning said, "Everything, sir? At this range?" Spruance said, "Everything we have. Now, get them in the air." Task Force 16 launched its full strike beginning at 7 o'clock in the morning on June 4th. It was a maximum effort. Both carriers emptied their flight decks: dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters. Approximately 117 aircraft from the Enterprise and the Hornet joined later by the Yorktown's air group. The launch was not clean. The Somme. American squadrons became separated on the way to the target. The fighters lost contact with the bombers. The torpedo bombers arrived first, alone, without fighter escort. The torpedo squadrons were slaughtered. 3 squadrons of slow, obsolete Devastator torpedo bombers attacked the Japanese carriers without fighter cover. The Japanese fighter screen tore them apart. Of 41 torpedo bombers that attacked, 35 were shot down. They scored not a single hit, but their sacrifice did something that no one had planned. The torpedo attacks coming in at sea level pulled the entire Japanese fighter screen down to low altitude. Every Japanese Zero was down near the water, hunting torpedo bombers, and at 10:22 in the morning, the American dive bombers arrived overhead at 12,000 feet in clear air, with no Japanese fighters above 10,000 feet to stop them. The dive bombers pushed over. In the space of 6 minutes, they hit 3 of the 4 Japanese carriers, the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu. All 3 were caught exactly as Browning had predicted, with their decks crowded with fueled and armed aircraft, fuel lines open, bombs stacked in the open. The American bombs turned them into infernos. 3 Japanese fleet carriers were burning out of control by 10:30 in the morning. The 4th carrier, the Hiryu, launched a counterstrike that found and crippled the Yorktown. But the Yorktown scouts found the Hiryu in turn, and that afternoon, dive bombers from the Enterprise put 4 bombs into her flight deck. By the evening of June 4th, all 4 Japanese carriers were destroyed. Then Spruance made his second crucial decision of the day, and it was the opposite kind of decision from the first. That night, the Japanese still had a powerful surface fleet of battleships and cruisers in the area. The aggressive move would have been to steam west in the dark and pursue them. Browning and several other officers urged Spruance to chase. Spruance refused. He reasoned that the Japanese, who excelled at night surface combat, would like nothing better than to draw the American carriers into a night gun battle where the American air power was useless. He had won the battle. He would not risk his irreplaceable carriers chasing a beaten enemy into the dark. He turned his task force east for the night, away from the Japanese, and only turned back west toward Midway before dawn. It was a decision of immense discipline. He had just won the greatest carrier victory in history, and he refused to gamble it for a larger one. History proved him right. The Japanese surface fleet had in fact hoped to catch the American carriers in a night engagement. Spruance had read the enemy's mind and declined the trap. The Battle of Midway destroyed 4 Japanese fleet carriers and broke the offensive power of the Imperial Japanese Navy in a single day. It was the turning point of the Pacific War. The Japanese never won another major naval battle. The initiative passed permanently to the United States, and the man who commanded the American carriers in that battle had been a carrier admiral for 8 days. Raymond Spruance had done something that almost no one in the Navy had expected. He had taken a job he was not trained for, admitted what he did not know, trusted the experts around him for the technical execution, and made the 2 or 3 strategic decisions that actually mattered with perfect judgment. He launched at the right moment. He declined the night chase. Those 2 decisions, more than anything else, are why Midway was a complete victory rather than a partial one. Admiral Nimitz understood exactly what he had seen. After the battle, he wrote of Spruance, "His decisions were sound in every respect." He made Spruance his own chief of staff. Then he gave him command of the 5th Fleet, the largest fighting fleet the United States ever assembled. For the rest of the war, Spruance commanded the Central Pacific Offensive, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, the Marianas, the Philippine Sea, where his fleet shot down 400 Japanese aircraft in a single day. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. He never lost a battle. The men who served under him noticed something. Spruance was never rattled. In the middle of the largest naval engagements in history, with hundreds of ships and thousands of aircraft in motion, he remained completely calm. He walked his 10 miles a day on the flight deck. He went to bed on time. He delegated everything he could and concentrated only on the handful of decisions that no one else could make. A junior officer once asked him how he stayed so calm in battle. Spruance said, "I am not calm. I have simply learned not to waste energy on the things I cannot control. I make the decisions that are mine to make. Then I let the battle happen." Raymond Spruance retired from the Navy in 1948 as a 4-star admiral. He had been the president of the Naval War College. He was, by the assessment of most naval historians, the finest American admiral of the Second World War. Some have called him the finest American admiral of any war. He never wrote a memoir. He was asked many times. He always refused. He believed that the credit for the victories belonged to the men who flew the planes and manned the ships, not to the admiral who stood on the bridge. When historians came to interview him about Midway, he answered their factual questions precisely and declined to discuss his own role. He would describe the decisions of the battle in clinical detail as if he were analyzing someone else's command. He would not accept praise. His relationship with Halsey lasted until the end of their lives. The two opposite men, the showman and the analyst, remained close friends for 30 years. Halsey always said that recommending Spruance for Midway was the best decision he ever made. Spruance always said that he had only been holding the job until Halsey got out of the hospital. Spruance died on December 13, 1969, at the age of 83. He was buried at Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, California. He had left instructions for his grave. He did not want a large monument. He did not want his victories listed. His grave is marked by a simple white government headstone, identical to those of the enlisted sailors buried around him. He had arranged it that way on purpose. He had asked to be buried in a row with 4 other officers who had served with him in the Pacific. 2 of them were admirals. 2 of them were not. He wanted to lie among them, not above them. The man who won the most important naval battle in American history is buried under a headstone that looks exactly like every other headstone in the field. That is the way he wanted it. If your father, your grandfather, your uncle, anyone in your family served in the United States Navy at Midway, on the Carriers Enterprise, Hornet, or Yorktown, in the cruiser and destroyer screen, or in the Fifth Fleet anywhere in the Central Pacific, leave their name in the comments below. Their ship, their unit, where they served. Don't just leave the name. Tell us one thing about them, one thing they did, or one thing they said, or one thing you remember. The men who turned the war at Midway deserve more than a name in a database. They deserve to be remembered as people. Subscribe if you want the next story. There are more of them.